Live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Cabinet. It's the 28th of January, the first Cabinet of 2025. Before we start officially, three of our Cabinet members are missing. There's been a big crash on the Ridgeway, so they'll join us when they can. Please can I remind you that when you speak, you identify yourself just the first time on every agenda item, and then you don't have to in the agenda item, but for each individual one, please do so. Make sure your phones are on silent. And a reminder to Cabinet members that we're not reading out all the recommendations unless they're amended. Some of them are really long. Everybody's got access to the papers, so the recommendations will be in front of you if you can bring them up. Anyway, so we'll move on to the first agenda item, which is apologies. I don't believe we have any. So the next agenda item is the minutes of the previous meeting, which was held on the 17th of December 2024. And does anybody in the Cabinet have any issues with the accuracy? I'm not seeing anybody saying anything, so I'll sign those later. Thank you. Any declarations or interest? No. When the three of the Cabinet members arrive, I don't believe they have any declarations, but I guess we probably need to ask them at the time, just to remind them. Can you, Lindsay, will you remind me, or somebody remind me? So the next one is public participation. Because the three Cabinet members aren't here, in terms of questions from members, we're going to push that back until they arrive, because Claire Sutton wants to particularly answer one particular question. So that'll be pushed back. We'll go ahead with item 4. And there's another change on the agenda. We're going to bring item, if I can find it, item 9. Oh, they've arrived. Here you go. Item 9, well, actually, 2 of them arrived. Item 9 is going to be brought forward and will come before the quarterly report. So it'll come before item 7, if that's okay. And we'll just let Councillor Sutton and Councillor Taylor set themselves down. We're on declarations of interest, Jill and Claire. I'm assuming you haven't got any? You okay? Okay. So we'll go on to public questions. There are 2 public questions. One's from Mr. Giles Watt. He's not present, so he will receive a written answer after the meeting. And so the first and only public question in the chamber is from Becky, who's Uniton's lead, I guess, is your title. You can introduce yourself anyway.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Becky Brookman. I am Uniton's Dorset Branch Secretary. So questions. Unison is one of the 3 recognised unions representing the voice of our workforce. We were disappointed yet again not to have received the Cabinet paper as agreed. We only had access to the Cabinet report once it became a public document. This is in direct contradiction to paragraph 9.4 in the report, which states that management are working with the unions. We highlighted this as a concern in our last question to the Joint Overview Committee on the 9th of January. Staff reduction figures, callously called benefits, were only known at the last minute, which puts into question the validity of the report. We were also advised that officers had not had sight of the detail until the Friday before, and that the final report was not completed until Monday, the 20th of January. It also calls into question the role of PwC. This information should have been provided in good time. Unison is concerned that the proposals of our future councils are based around a survey that was completed by staff in August 2024. This had an overall response rate of 40%. Some directorates were significantly less. This puts into doubt the accuracy of the findings and whether the proposal can achieve the savings that have been highlighted. There is not enough information contained within the high-level EQIA. There needs to be an understanding of the potential impacts of our future councils before it is agreed. These cuts are focusing on roles that are mainly undertaken by women in low-paid positions. There is also a potential impact on customers through automation, especially for older people and those digitally excluded. Scenario 4 in the report shows a £10 million investment in external capacity, but Unison wants to see additional investment in our staff. Upskilling staff in AI in year 1 would reduce the need for external capacity in years 2 and 3 and reduce the overall redundancy payouts and develop a more resilient workforce. The overall cost of our future council is £48 million, with a potential saving of £77 million. Unison believes that rather than just looking at reducing staff costs, investment could have been made in an economic growth, bringing in more business rates and in turn increasing revenue for the council. Automation underpins everything our future council is hoping to deliver, yet there is no detail on how this will be achieved. We have not been provided with any evidence that AI will be able to replace roles currently undertaken by Dorset Council's greatest assets, their staff. Given this, the lack of the EQIA data and reports being rushed through, can Cabinet be assured that this programme is the right direction for Dorset Council and its community?
Thank you for your question. Councillor Wilson's going to answer on behalf of the council.
Sorry. Ben Wilson, South East Purbeck, Cabinet Member for Corporate Development and Transformation. Thank you very much for your question, and I share the sentiment that you gave, that the employees and officers in Dorset Council are their most valued asset, and we hold that very seriously as a value as we continue down Our Future Council transformation journey. I'll address first your point on process, and then some of the specific questions you have about the content. From my perspective, and this is my perspective, I was very keen to see that we had the right answer and we did the right level of analysis so that what we published was as accurate a picture as we could portray at that point in time. As such, the officers worked very hard to hit the deadlines that were put in place. And they did hit those deadlines, but I do appreciate that there wasn't a lot of flex in there. There wasn't a lot of additional time in there. However, the visibility that members of Unison have had is the same visibility as had by members in this chamber. And there certainly hasn't been any deliberate lack of transparency in providing those reports. The process we undertake through Our Future Council is one of refinement. At each stage this comes to Cabinet, and this will continue, you will see a far more refined picture of the analysis. And that's really what we're aiming for, and therefore the content you now have is the best indication of the savings and the impact that will have on employees, as well as some of the other elements around investments. As regards to PwC, they provided us with additional capacity and an expert analysis throughout. It is a partnership with PwC, and we have no reason to question their capability. They've worked with us step by step. As you'll be aware, we do continue to engage the workforce through all employee communications, and take opportunity to ask questions and participate in forums, and actually have had impressive levels of engagement throughout. We are committed to hearing that all voices are heard, and in line with our principles agreed with yourselves and other trade unions. We will conduct, and this is a point around how we go down the next level of detail. We have every intention of conducting comprehensive equality impact assessments to understand the potential impact on all employees and vulnerable customer groups. These will be completed before final decisions are made to push ahead with specific elements of the programme. The £10 million investment allocated to additional capacity is at this point in time the best estimate. If we don't need to spend that on external capacity and the internal capacity is available, then we will definitely pursue that route. That kind of goes without saying. And we look forward to working with the trade unions, supporting our communications and change management principles, including supporting and training development in new skills and technologies to build the resilient workforce. The OFC programme aims to deliver better ways of working to achieve the outcomes and improved productivity clearly articulated in the business case. This is a long-term programme that aims to maintain the sustainability of council services against growing customer need. We're exploring all avenues to enhance revenue and reduce the need for employee reductions. We're committed to a thorough and transparent process, ensuring all decisions are made responsibly, considerately, and with a sustainable future for all our employees, organisation and communities in mind. We appreciate your engagement and hope by working together we can deliver the best outcomes for Dorset Council, its employees and the communities we serve.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. You will receive that in writing as well. Councillor Hope, now you've joined us, have you any declarations of interest? No, thank you. Item 5 will remain in its position since Councillor Sutton has arrived. So questions from members. We've got 3 questions. The first is from Councillor Hannah Hobbs-Chell and will be answered by Councillor Sutton. Hannah, where are you? Over there.
Thank you. Hello, Councillor Hannah Hobbs-Chell, Ferndown South Ward. Thank you. Right, here goes. With the recent highlight of the IICSA report and previously the recent and devastating story of Sarah Sharif, I would like to ensure that Dorset Council is doing everything in its power to ensure that we as corporate parents are protecting and safeguarding all children and young people in Dorset. I would like to see Dorset become one of the leading authorities in CSA and child abuse protection and prevention. And I recognise and appreciate that this good work has already begun with Pathfinder and Hub work. But there is always more we can do. I am a victim and survivor and gave evidence in the IICSA inquiry. I have been following the politics and news for many years, but this most recent highlight has again brought my experience and that of thousands and thousands of others into the fore. I am also so very relieved that there is finally an announcement that the recommendation of mandatory reporting will become law. This, had it been in place when I was a child and teenager, would most probably have saved me from deeper harm at the hands of my abusers and from myself. Instead, however, multiple agencies that should have protected and then supported me to heal failed me also over many years and into adulthood, and have left me with lifelong consequences. They saved my life, but left me with the deepest scars. I would, however, like to pay credit to individuals within this who clearly cared and did better, and it is thanks to them and those family and friends who loved and believed me that I stand here today. Whilst national implementation of recommendations is essential, and this first implementation is perhaps one of the most critical, there is also much that can be done locally and within local authorities. Indeed, places such as Telford have seen very positive results where local initiatives have been implemented. In particular, establishing a victims and survivors panel who liaise with, help to educate and make recommendations to local authorities, the police and NHS has been praised by victims and local authority partners alike. I am sure that as a council, we will ensure that we fully fulfil and go above and beyond in terms of implementing the national guidance and law. But I would like to ask whether Dorset Council would work to establish a victims and survivors panel that also integrates with healthcare and police agencies as a first step to ensuring we are one of the leading local authorities for protection and prevention of child abuse. Further, I'd like to ask that following the establishment of a victims and survivors panel, we look at other innovative solutions, both as a result of listening to the panel and to learning from innovation and research across the world, to ensuring that we support victims and survivors, as well as provide robust prevention work above and beyond the national recommendations wherever possible. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Claire Sutton, Robbell and White Ward, Cabinet Member for Children's Services, Education and Skills. Thank you, Hannah, for raising this to enable me to provide reassurance, I hope, on this critical issue, and for your courage in contextualising this in relation to your own personal experience. I agree there's always more we can do, but I can categorically assure you that we are striving to go above and beyond in protecting all Dorset's children. Officers have provided me with an extremely comprehensive answer, which we will provide you with and which will appear in the minutes, of which I'm going to draw out a few key elements now. Thank you. So we continue to strengthen our practice in line with our extra familial harm strategy. Elements of this include, through the Pathfinder programme, embedding more integrated multi-agency working, true multi-agency decision-making and greater multi-agency oversight of child protection, including in relation to child sexual abuse. That's one. Enhancing our targeted youth work to promote relationship-based interventions for young people which respond to need, risk and harm in their own spaces, including in the community, in education settings and at home. Taking a contextual safeguarding approach alongside partners and communities to increase safety within spaces where children and young people spend their time to reduce risk on a community and group basis, not just for individuals. Developing community guardianship and safe spaces for women and young girls, in particular through our Pineapple project. Delivering training on extrafamilial harms, including sexual exploitation, child sexual exploitation, to our own staff, partners, community groups, education providers, parents and young people. And in relation to online child sexual exploitation, working closely with partners through the extrafamilial harm strategic and tactical groups and the Community Safety Partnership to increase awareness and identify and respond to risk and harm. Following the publication of the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse report, the Dorset Safeguarding Children's Partnership has undertaken a multi-agency audit of children who have experienced intrafamilial child sexual abuse. Recommendations will be presented at the Multi-Agency Quality Practice and Action Group in February. In relation to the healing to which you refer, we are currently working with the Family Rights Group to develop our own Family Advisory Board to work in partnership with children and families with lived experience. This will need very careful consideration to ensure that we provide a safe space and to avoid re-traumatising survivors, informed by best practice elsewhere, including in Telford, the expertise of our colleagues in health, and the Sexual Trauma and Recovery Service, which is our primary support offer for children, young people and adults who have experienced child sexual abuse. I very much welcome the opportunity to discuss this further. Hannah, if you would welcome that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sutton. We've got two more questions, both come from Councillor Belinda Borden. So the first is going to be answered by Councillor Andrews and then second by me.
Thank you. I'm not quite sure how to follow that. But thank you, Hannah. Belinda Borden, Lyme Regis and Charmouth. I'd like to ask for an opportunity to let members and officers know of the sad death last week of Philip Sankey, who was the Lyme Regis expert on WATAG, the Western Area Transport Group. What Philip didn't know about the public transport service, present and past, wasn't worth knowing. He was always happy to reply instantly to emails or face-to-face questions with a staggering in-depth knowledge of the history and development of our bus and train services. He was so committed to serving his community and county over decades that I fear we've lost not only a wonderful local volunteer, but a huge fount of knowledge and expertise. So it is in the spirit of the gentle, kind, deeply conscientious and caring Philip Sankey that I'd like to mark his passing with a question to the portfolio holder for place services. How can the desires and aspirations of Dorset's residents for a well-connected public transport network, which genuinely opens opportunities for work, education, social connection and leisure, best be articulated in the design of the new bus franchising responsibilities? And how can Dorset Council involve its locally elected representatives and resident experts, for example, WATAG and other area transport action groups, in shaping the best possible public and community transport network that reduces social isolation and rural inequality?
Councillor John Andrews, Sherborne East Place Services Cabinet Member. Thank you very much, Councillor Bowden, for your question. And thank you for your remarks about Mr. Sankey. I don't believe I ever met Mr. Sankey. but I'm sure he would have crossed my path somewhere in his capacity. So to answer your question, a decision to pursue the bus franchising has not been made at this time. Introducing bus franchising will be a very significant decision to take and require a full understanding of the costs and benefits of implementing this approach. It is also the case that the option of franchising is something that is not currently available to Dorset Council. In the future, the proposed new buses bill will enable all local authorities to pursue this option if it is the right model for their area. The bill is currently in the committee stage in the House of Lords, and we continue to track its progress with interest. I'm committed to improving the bus network by implementing the Council's bus service improvement plan. With the bus grant recently announced by the Department of Transport for 25-26, we can begin to deliver the new and improved travel options across Dorset. It's through our established enhanced partnership that we will make these meaningful changes. I've recently chaired myself the first board meeting with the local bus and community transport operators and was encouraged by their openness, their positive quick wins that were identified. I've asked Councillor Derek Beer, who has extensive knowledge of the transport network in Dorset, to chair the Bus Users Stakeholder Group, which among many participants, stakeholders groups includes the Transport Action Groups. We are setting up a bus group meeting, which will give these groups the opportunity to propose improvements that fit with the aims of Dorset BSIT. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Devolution may offer opportunities as well, I guess, in the future. So your second question, please, Belinda.
Thank you. I think this one has been superseded by parliamentary action or inaction, but this is, please could the leader and portfolio holder for the environment and climate change undertake to ask Cabinet and or full Council to pledge Dorset Council's support for the cross-party climate and nature bill. The Climate and Nature Bill makes sure the UK aims to keep global heating down to 1.5 degrees C, which gives us a chance to avoid the worst impacts of climate change. It commits to reversing the destruction of nature by 2030 and calls for a Climate and Nature Assembly to help Government and Parliament develop an emergency strategy to turn policies into local action. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Borden. I share your disappointment that the Climate and Nature Bill was essentially killed off last Friday. It's disappointing that the Labour government of making promises, yet they're not prepared to actually commit to actually making them happen, and don't even mention the incinerator in terms of carbon output. I have a written response. It's actually the response that's going to Mr. Watt, but it's relevant to your question as well, so I'll just read it out. As many people would no doubt be aware, the government moved a motion to adjourn the second reading of the Climate and Nature Bill, which means that it's now unlikely to progress in the current parliamentary session. This is extremely disappointing and is, I hope, not part of a growing trend to keep making the same mistakes that we have in the past, when the needs of nature and our climate are put on the back burner for short-term gain. Needless to say, we would have been supportive of the bill if it had progressed. I wrote to all of our Dorset MPs to ask that they support the bill, and I am eminently grateful to Vicky Slade, Ed Morello and Simon Hoare for the support on the principles of the bill, again reflecting the cross-party nature of this critical issue. We have made tackling the climate and nature emergencies one of our top priorities as a council, and how we lead on this issue is something that will resonate for years to come, both within Dorset and how we influence others. The government has stated that as part of the adjournment of the Climate and Nature Bill, it will make a statement on government progress towards international climate and nature targets within 6 months. It is important that both this council and our partners hold them to account for this, as we most individually and collectively continue to represent and act as the custodians of our natural environment if we are to put in place the measures that will allow future generations to prosper and not to face the potentially catastrophic impacts of biodiversity loss and climate change. Thank you. So that's the end of questions from councillors. The next item on the agenda is the forward plan. I don't intend to spend too much time on this. Do any members of the Cabinet wish to raise anything? No, we've got a fairly full agenda tonight. As I mentioned earlier, we're going to bring agenda item 9 forward. So this is the OFC report. It's going to be presented by Councillor Ben Wilson, supported by Lisa Cotton. Over to you, Ben.
Thank you. Ben Wilson, South East Purbeck. The report you have in front of you is, as I was saying earlier, a continuation of the work that last came to Cabinet in November, and an element of which, the transformation plan element, went to Joint Overview Committee on the 9th of January this year. Just to contextualise the work so that we're all on the same page and remind everyone why we're doing this piece of work. The business case you have in front of you for our future council is seeking to address a number of different needs, one of which, but not the only of which, is financial pressures. It is also there to address increasing customer need and increasing demands of customers and to deliver improved services, but also critically to address inefficiencies that might exist today within the way Dorset Council operates. So really the outcomes it's seeking to deliver are improving customer interactions, optimizing the way we work internally through streamlined processes and an increased use of technology. A lot of the time that has been spent since this came to Cabinet in November it's really, as I was saying earlier, been a process of refinement from the business case that was brought to this chamber then, and really taking down to the next level of detail both the design for how the council will operate in the future, the target operating model, but also the financial business case that underpins that and has been an element of which is included within the budget that we will be discussing later. A couple of specifics in terms of what's evolved since we last discussed this. You may recall there are a number of different work streams. We've added a work stream entitled Community Partnership and Facilitation. We've added that because we recognise that the devolution process, whether we're talking about devolution from Westminster or devolution to our town and parish councils, is going to impact the way in which we deliver services and indeed the services we deliver. And we believe that needs special attention within our future council. Responsibility for some of the definition there will be shared across different elements of the leadership, the SLT, but it's critical that we make sure that is integrated into our thinking. So that's one of the evolutions. The other critical evolution, which you may recognise if you've been scrutinising some of the numbers in the business case, is that with support from PwC, we have been refining the scope of those, critically, the elements of Dorset Council that is impacted by our future council, and those elements that today sit outside of that scope. And largely the elements sitting outside of that scope are what we're terming service delivery. They're frontline. That's not to say they don't need improvement. That's not to say there aren't changes in technology implementation in those areas. You may recall from a previous submission, there will be separate portfolios of work in each of the directorates. But it's critical just for this purpose that we realise what we're talking about, and that's really the internal operations of Dorset Council. That is really the main focus of the scope for this work. So in terms of the recommendations, there are 6 listed in front of you. I'm not going to read through all of them. I mean, fundamentally, what we are looking for here today is approval to continue this work into the next step, and I'll talk about what that looks like in a minute. But we're looking for the approval of the target operating model as it's now been defined, the implementation plans that accompany that target operating model, and then the underlying business case, the financial case that accompanies this work. In terms of summarising some of that then, what we've done is we've looked at a number of scenarios, and actually there are two sets of scenarios, so bear with me, I'll try and just walk us through this. We know, and we talked about in November, that there's a range of savings that we could pursue. And it was quite a broad range. It was in this, gosh, where is it on my page? But it was 7 to 23 million in terms of what our annualized savings we should be pursuing back in November. We've narrowed, through that definition of scope, that refinement of scope, we've narrowed that down. It's now between 6.2 and 18.8, and that's what you'll see in the paper in front of you. Through advice from PwC and through internal discussions, we've made the decision that we want to pursue the higher end of that, and PwC have advised us that is within our grasp. That's something we should be pursuing in terms of efficiency. And that obviously then drives exactly how much change we want to pursue. So that's one set of criteria. And then the other set of criteria is about how fast we want to go. And we set out 3 different scenarios there, and maybe not unsurprisingly, we've chosen the middle one. One was too conservative and wouldn't have delivered the savings we need to deliver, but the latter one assumed that we would just take cost out immediately in this financial year, before we were able to deliver technology, before we were able to do the true transformation. And from our perspective, that came with too high a risk. So we've chosen something that is more of a middle ground. What that means is, from a financial perspective, is we won't be hitting that target of ongoing savings until year 3. So we'll have 2 years of really ramping up and driving those efficiencies, so that we are able to deliver a full year of savings in year 3. So that's the savings side of things. In terms of next year, just so that we're all on the same page, we're now projecting a 10 million saving in the budget for next year. That's made up of 4 different parts. One part is 50% of the saving we think we can get for next year. The reason it's 50% is we're not really going to achieve that until later in the financial year. So we've reduced that down, and that's now at approximately 6 million. And then you'll be aware that we talked about, actually, we need to manage vacancies better within the council. And then we also need to look at some of the organisational structures across the council and understand where there might be further savings. And then latterly look at third-party spend. So between those 4 elements, that's how we come up with our savings target for next year, which has been integrated into the budget. Obviously, the flip of savings is the investment, and that's spelt out in this paper as well. It is a projection. It is, we need to work within an envelope. It should be noted that we already have 12 million earmarked for our enterprise resource planning, or ERP, solution. And that will come to this chamber in a separate business case, because that has been ongoing as a piece of work, and it's something that we absolutely have to do, because the system we're operating at the moment does run out of its lifespan in the next couple of years. So of the investment we're requesting, there's an element of it that's already earmarked. The big moving feast in the investment that we've been grappling with is the severance costs, the redundancy costs. Obviously, if we move at the pace we're talking about, that's going to be spread over a number of years. And as I said in my answer to the union representative, and I say now, where we can manage vacancies, existing vacancies, if we are existing within a 10% turnover on an annual basis, not only will that serve our employees better, for them to make decisions rather than to be part of this process, but also that will reduce down the investment. So we will be looking for opportunities. It should also be said that from the capacity request, we already had 3 million that was approved in the prior cabinet in November, where this was discussed. So there are elements of the total investment, 15 million, that has already been earmarked. So lastly, I just want to say before I open up for questions, in terms of next steps, as I say, it's a process of refinement. Where we now need to move into is really mobilizing the work streams. That will require some further design work. It's not a question of going straight on and implementing. There is an urgency around how we approach some of the savings. So that will obviously influence the order in which we approach different elements of the program. Obviously, the long-term technology implementations will be part of that 2 to 3 year journey, as opposed to the next 6 months. But really, the focus now for the officers and myself is to make sure this program is properly stood up. And then some of those going forward, we will see some requests for some of those big projects come back to this chamber. So you're not going to see this as one big blob of work, if you like, for want of a better term. It will come forward in more specific blocks. And really the first of those will be the ERP in the coming months. So that is my recommendation here today. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. I take that as a proposal. Yes, and can I have a seconder, please? Councillor Robinson. Okay, I'll open it up to the floor. As usual, we'll do any member of this council who isn't on the cabinet, and then we will close and just cabinet members. It's a long agenda. So Councillor Jesperson and then Councillor Perry.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Councillor Sherry Jesperson, Hillforts and Upper Tarrants-Ford. First of all, thank you very much for your presentation. This is, as we all know, probably the single most important thing that this council is going to do in the coming years, and there is enormous potential in here that we are all keen to support. I have a couple of points that I will like to make and turn into questions, but before I do, I just have to say it's disappointing to see Unison here again feeling that they have been not included in this process. This is a really long journey, and if we have alienated our staff so early in that journey, that's a shame. We have always described ourselves as a council that is a good place to work, and nobody takes that more seriously than our own chief executive, who I know it's his absolute passion. So I don't know quite how this has come about, that we have put the Unison feeling so much on the back foot. But could I put in a plea? Could we wipe the slate clean? Could we, and I'm not looking across here, I'm looking here really, could we do better? Because it's a long journey and we need to take our staff with us. That's it's not really a question, I just needed to get that off my chest. My questions are, the first point I wanted to make was, Councillor Wilson has heard me say this before, and thank you very much, Councillor Wilson, for those giving us a sight of this paper as soon as you were able to do so. That was very helpful. Now, the pre-front door in this scheme is absolutely critical, because that's the thing, that's one of the things that's going to be very different, along with the use of technology, but the whole pre-front door work is absolutely critical. It relies very, very heavily on the community and voluntary sector. We have a long history in the county council and this council of working with the community and voluntary sector. And we know from that experience that actually that's not easy to do, because they're not employees and they come and go and they have their own agendas, and it's, you can't drive, you have to lead and encourage that sector. So I do want us to be aware, to be cognizant as we're making this plan, that the makeup of the community and voluntary sector across the board, across the nation, has changed very significantly in the last 10 years. I mean, we noticed it post-COVID, but actually the change had begun before COVID. and there isn't the resource out there that there used to be in the past. There isn't the number of people volunteering that there used to be in the past. So can we be sure that we're aware of the challenge that will pose in taking this forward? It's going to be a lot of hard work to get the community and voluntary sector to be able to be the partner that we need them to be. It's perfectly possible, but I just want assurance that we're aware of how difficult that might be. The second point I'd like to make is that at the, well, I've got the microphone if you don't mind, at the overview committee next week, later this week, we will be looking at the draft customer strategy. Now, the draft customer strategy is the voice of our customers. That's telling us what our customers think, what it's like to do business with Dorset Council. And there's the information in there needs to inform absolutely from the ground up our future council plans. Because this strategy tells us what it's like now to do business with Dorset Council and what our customers think it ought to be like. And that the possibilities, the opportunities, when you delve into this customer strategy in some depth, the opportunities in there for delivering absolutely radically different but very, very effective customer services. It's really, the opportunities are phenomenal, but it's really essential that our future council document plans are informed by the customer strategy and what the people who use the service are. So can I be assured that this will be part of the planning? We don't want those two things in two different departments, in two different silos, coming to the overview committee at two different times, because they're all part of the same piece of work. So can I be assured that you're talking to each other about these two aspects of the work? Thank you.
Ben Wilson, South East Purbeck. So to your first point, thank you very much for the question, and it's something I know that is a concern and one that should be an ongoing focus, and we should need to make sure it is. Regarding pre-front door, the reason we've brought in the additional work stream is to make sure that we give specific attention to any decision that is made around communities and partnerships and how we work with them. I will ask the officers if they want to add anything, but it's certainly, you know, those decisions have to be made very carefully and with our eyes open, because if we are delegating or devolving, any services into the community, and those services then can't be delivered, we will have failed in our job to transform and improve. So that certainly needs specific attention. I don't know if the officers want to add anything on that point.
Thank you. Lisa Cotton, Corporate Director for Transformation, Customer and Cultural Services. So as Councillor Wilson has said, the programme has been now introduced, and that's absolutely looking at that framework. So that first workshop was held today, and the details of that will come forward in the future. That will really then start to identify how we're going to co-produce our plans with our communities at the heart of how we're going to deliver services, how we're going to really respond to those local needs. This is all in line with the Communities for All priority as set out in the council plan. So really looking to deliver the outcomes that is in our Communities for All priority. So that work has started today, and that will be developed in the next few months to come.
And the follow-up on the customer strategy, absolutely. The two pieces of work need to integrate. I mean, what we're trying to deliver as part of the front door, rather than so that it's the actual customer interface, is to deliver services in a way that best suit the residents, and that's not a homogenous landscape. So we absolutely need to take into account all of the different opportunities and different permutations of that landscape.
Thank you, Councillor Jesperson. Chief Exec Matt Prosser wishes to also respond to you.
Thank you, Leader, and thank you, Councillor Jesperson, for the question. I think it's only right that I do respond to the point that you made earlier. Clearly, we've heard from our unions this evening. That's really, really important. I'd like you to hear from management as well as part of that. Hearing one side of the context is perhaps not always helpful. We do have good engagement with our unions. I meet personally with them, and the teams have been meeting with them across part of this process, but this has been quite rapid at the end of the process. Meetings have been held with them. We'll continue to hold with them. The challenge for us is also in a programme that looks to potentially to reduce headcount is always going to be a challenge and a point of tension between ourselves and our colleagues in the union. But I represent all 4,815 colleagues who work for Dorset Council. We hold all member webinars and will continue to engage all staff, those who are part of a union and those who are not. But thank you for giving me the opportunity to say that. You know I'm committed to it.
Councillor Parry.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Andrew Parry, West Parley Ward. You fleetingly referred to a review around third-party spend, which is an area that I would welcome a review of. Both in the People's Directorate and the Place Directorate, I think there is great potential. I know it is often reduced to the level of conversations of how much does the council spend on a tin of paint, and I know some people are cynical about that, but actually, in terms of a visual reference point, it's not a bad starting place. But of course, we do understand that then goes on to areas such as tier 4 beds and secure units for children and young people, and big projects such as, you know, the new recycling plants in Blandford and beyond. All sorts of areas of council business seem to fall under various procurement frameworks, and the spends with those areas are absolute minefield. What I think would be welcomed is an early assurance from you that, given the fact that some of these contracts take a long time to actually roll out and embed, or end in some cases due to periods of notice, that this comes before a scrutiny committee of both people and the place, perhaps even a joint scrutiny committee at the very earliest opportunity, so that we can be well positioned to able to get some understanding of what we're doing in terms of third-party spend going forward.
I think Aidan is poised to come in.
Thank you. Good evening. Aidan Dunn, Exec Director for Corporate Development. Councillor Parry makes absolutely a very powerful point about the vast range of things that we as a council have to buy in our procurement mechanisms, but also, having done the procurement, there's the contract management as well. So I think one of the principles of our future council is bringing services together and learning from best practice from those services. And that's one of the things we want to do. We know that we have some real areas of expertise within the council and real strength around contract management, for example, and we want to make sure that that's shared best practice. So I think in terms of the work that's underway, I think that's a welcome area for scrutiny, and I've got no problem with that.
Councillor Azad.
Thank you, Chairman. I just want to make it clear, Lisa Cotton, mentioned about a workshop that's just been had today. Is that the steering group that has been set up, or is it another one, another sort of being? Could you answer that, please?
Thank you, Councillor Azad. That was an internal workshop to start to scope the programme that's now being included in our future council transformation. So that was officers that met today to start to put the scope and the themes around how they're going to take that programme forward. But it will come to the transformation steering group at a point in the future.
Thank you.
I don't see anybody with their hands up. Nobody online? Okay, so we'll move to Cabinet members. Anybody wish to comment? Nope, not seeing anything there. So does any member of the Cabinet disagree with the recommendations as set out in the report? Nope. In which case, in the absence of any disagreement, the recommendations are approved. As has been mentioned, this is a huge project. You'll be hearing a lot about this going forward. So we'll move back to the agenda as it was. So this is I'll get it right, the December 2024 brackets period 9 financial management report 2024/25, and it'll be presented by Councillor Clifford.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Simon Clifford, I'm the Cabinet Member for Finance. This paper outlines where we are now within the current financial year, and I'll draw your attention to the views of the finance team that we are still in what they are terming a high-risk area, and that's something that we need to think about throughout the next two papers. Finances are under pressure, forecasts are challenging, and demand goes through huge peaks and troughs, which does make it extremely difficult for our teams to accurately predict spending and forecast costs. I'd like to make a few comments which will effectively link this paper where we are at this moment in time to the next paper, which is our future budget. They are, of course, inextricably linked. So I'll draw your attention to in-year service overspends. While these are roughly in line with previous years, it is still concerning, a lot of activity going on, and a draw on our reserves as our frontline services deal with more and more demand. The report highlights each directorate and individual overspends, as well as the mitigation that's been used and been put in place throughout the course of the year. I would, though, like to thank our frontline teams. This is both good news for the individuals, getting the care and support that they need, as well as a headache for our finance teams on where the money is going to come from. In terms of financing care, we are doing well. We're doing very well, but we need to do even better. And when I talk about care, I talk also about care and protection. And I reference Councillor Hobbs-Chell with her extremely important question and challenge to us, the Council, which reinforces the incredibly important and vital decisions that our staff make on a daily basis. I do thank her for having the courage and bravery to come forward with a personal story that has such a big impact. Thank you. In terms of transformation, we've heard how important the transformation, the council-wide transformation scheme is going to be. I encourage the challenge from councillors to make sure we're on the right path and to make sure we fully understand all the decisions that are going to be part of transformation. As someone heavily connected with a number of charities, I really recognise the fact that the charity sector, the voluntary sector, is under extreme pressure as well. And it is too easy and too quick to say we'll move from one provision to another. It doesn't work like that anymore. You're absolutely right to continue that challenge. I will reference two more points, one of which is a soft spot of mine. I always like to say to encourage people to read the capital budget. It seems to go through without much oversight. It's a really important part of what we do, and it sets strategy into the future and where we're going to be. So we are looking to deliver a huge programme of investment in Dorset Council, and that has an impact on the whole of Dorset as well. We have taken steps to make this spend more relevant each year, and in this paper you will see that we're looking to spend round about £100 million on projects that range from school to roads, from recycling to care provision. It effectively covers everything we do. And finally, in this report, you'll see the third recommendation outlining a move of £7 million from our reserves to fund health and safety compliance in our buildings, school and other assets. I have a pre-prepared statement to read, and unfortunately, I'll be very limited in the answers I'll be able to give to questions on this matter for the time being. There is some further detail on page 58. It is sparse, but more explanation and expansion will come forward. So if I can now read the pre-prepared statement. I'd like to draw your attention to paragraph 10.47, which describes the health, safety and building compliance work which has been undertaken to ensure our buildings meet the required standards. This work has been undertaken at speed, recognising those health and safety requirements. But at the request of the council leader, our monitoring officer has commissioned the South West Audit Partnership, known as SWAP, to investigate some of the procurement, funding processes and compliant aspects of this work. SWAP is an independent organisation, independent of the council, and will update the Audit and Governance Committee and our external auditors once complete. That's the statement. My final comment is, as a councillor and as a party and a ruling group, we collectively want to bring this into the public arena and be totally transparent. It is frustrating that we have to wait for the results of the investigations, but the seriousness of the issues being investigated needs to be reflected in a thorough investigation in which we can all be confident. On that rather sombre note, Chair, I'm happy to move the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor Clifford. I believe Richard Biggs. Councillor Biggs is going to second.
It's Richard Biggs, Cabinet Member for Property, Assets and Economic Growth and Member for Poundbury or Dorchester Poundbury Ward. Very happy to second this. And I note very much the point you just made, the statement you read out. I think it's particularly important. It's in my area, and I've taken on that area, and I think it's really important that compliance work is done, but it's also approved in the correct way, which is what this is doing. But I won't comment any more, but it is essential work. And again, as I've said several times, very disappointing that we've got an estate that has had to require so much work to it just to make it compliant, let alone fix the roof. But I think all the other matters within there have been discussed at great length through our various committees and through workshops, etc. And are well known, and there are challenges which we have plans in place to deal with. So very happy to second that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Biggs. I'll open it to the floor. Anybody wish to ask a question? Councillor Parry.
Thank you. Yes, and I'm grateful for the responses we've heard from the Cabinet Member responsible for funding in regard to the health and safety compliance matters. What I did want to touch on, of course, in the report is a sense of frustration between what central government had promised us and the reality of what we are incurring cost-wise in respect to the National Transfer Scheme for unaccompanied children. Those of us who were involved in that programme when it was initiated were assured at the time by erstwhile members of the establishment in Whitehall that these, of course, would be fully funded, and were grateful for us for our support in ensuring their welfare. And we took up their welfare as a serious matter and have delivered on that, I'd like to feel. But the funding has been mismatched. Do we have an understanding to what extent that funding is currently running at in terms of a mismatch, and what, if anything, can be done to try and address it and appeal to ministers through the political channels?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Parry. Just a few overarching comments, but I'll hand over to the experts. I mean, as you're aware, as the paper states, that the real issue is when those unaccompanied asylum seekers hit 18. That's where the most significant gap is. Before that, we've almost got the books balanced as I'm reading it. But I'll hand over to behind me.
Hi. Paul Dempsey, Executive Director for Children's Services. Yes, you'll see at point 10.10 the gap between the funding that we get from central government and our spend is 0.4 million, so £400,000. As Councillor Sutton indicated, most of that pressure is coming with the cost for asylum-seeking children when they turn 18 and they become care leavers. We still owe them a duty of care and support, but the funding reduces significantly from just over £1,000 a week to somewhere near £270 a week. And that is not just to cover their live-in and accommodation costs, it's also to cover all the other costs associated with personal advisor support in our care leaver teams and the rest of the infrastructure and the staff team that goes into looking after those young people. So as I say, the over 18 population is the key pressure that we're facing. And I understand that we have previously made representations to central government. I see the Chief Executive nodding, because I think that representation was made by Matt Brosser.
Thank you, Mr Dempsey. I probably should point out that Councillor Sutton and I, amongst other people, are meeting with our MPs on Friday. So Councillor Sutton, as well as being our Cabinet Member for Children's, is also attending as leader of the Green Party, which is why she's at that meeting, but I'm sure we'll both raise it with the MPs at the time. Any other questions? Nobody online? No? Okay, so Councillor Clifford.
Just like to add that Councillor Parry is astute as ever in picking out central government's promises and central government's delivery That's going to be a recurring theme over the next few, certainly 3 hours, but certainly for the next few weeks.
Thank you, Councillor Clifford. I'll allow any other member who isn't on the Cabinet. No, nobody wants to speak. Any Cabinet members wish to comment further on this paper? No. Does any Cabinet member disagree with the recommendations as set out? No, in which case the recommendations are approved. Thank you. So the next one is the biggie, I guess, for tonight, maybe. So this is the budget. Then Councillor Clifford is going to introduce it.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to start with my personal thanks to the finance team. It's a huge effort to bring any budget to Cabinet. It's even more challenging when you have to deal with new recruits, such as myself, a new council, and in Dorset's case, unusually, new politics. So my grateful thanks to all involved. I would like to name check some of the key people. Heather Lappin, Hannah Brown, Lee House, Sian White, Paul Ackrell, and of course the two Stooge brothers who are in the meeting with us at the minute, Sean and Aidan at the back there. I was told when I first came in as a new Cabinet member that my predecessor liked to challenge himself to not mention figures when he was doing a finance report. So I'm going to take up that challenge and see how well I got on with it. £416 million is a record sum to spend on Dorset Council services. I'm sorry, I just couldn't resist it. We are spending a lot of money on goods, services and service delivery in Dorset. So I don't want to lose sight of the fact of what a big player we are to our local economy as well as to our local residents. We're spending about £40 million more than last year on our vital services. And again, I thank all those involved on frontline services, our management team and support staff. It's a hard job and they do a great job in my view. Every individual contributes to the work this council carries out every day. But if we're spending more, how come we have to make savings? It's a challenge I find standing on doorsteps, how to explain that to people. The simple answer is demand. Demand for our services is increasing, and in particular in our children's and adults' social care, and as we've referenced a couple of times, and our protection services. So this report details council tax, which is raised to a new maximum level, new charges, new income generation, and increased business rates. And still, we can't keep up with the cost of demand. So we have to take strong action, and this set of budget proposals, I believe, demonstrates that. We are being more efficient, and we will continue to push to be even more efficient. We are challenging our suppliers and contractors to reduce costs and our third-party spend, as has been referenced. We are investing to save in transforming Dorset Council into a council fit for the future, but it is very challenging. To meet this demand for statutory services, we are making cuts, and we're being very open and honest about that. £14.4 million within these papers are cuts. Each one of these has been discussed, thought through and weighed up. I understand how hard this is for members of staff, for management and the leadership team, and we've heard some good challenge from Unison that we must do better as we start to carry on our consultation. Excuse me. We will do all we can to help staff move between roles, reskill, retrain and adapt, but we will be a smaller, more IT-driven, more customer focus, more productive council in the years to come. I would also like to point to our capital budget, which is outlining vital and important schemes, such as very significant investment in our coastal areas, IT systems that we've heard about to support the way we change how this council operates and works, museum, roads, schools. The programme is huge across all parts of Dorset. I do want to draw attention to our reserves. You will have noted our Q3 comments and statement that reserves are forecast to be around about £100 million by the end of the financial year. Many of these reserves are earmarked for a particular purpose and cannot be used to fund day-to-day services. Having said that, in my experience, it's a good, indeed a positive sign for any budget, whether your own household budget, a business budget, or Dorset Council's budget, where money is set aside for a rainy day. And that's what we're proposing to do here once again. Our savings were starting to look under pressure, so I'm proposing we rebuild them with a movement of £4.77 million to ensure we comfortably remain among the minimum 5% level for our general fund balances. This is prudent and essential. In closing, I will reference my remarks on the last item. Dorset Council is under increasing financial pressure due to two areas. The first is demand for our services and costs like inflation, which we've gone into in a little bit of detail and is throughout our report. Our brilliant teams work hard and invest in prevention schemes to help provide people with the care and support they need at the earliest opportunity. Better outcomes for those individuals and, frankly, cheaper for us as a council. It's been a successful approach for a number of years, and we are continuing to invest in it. The other area for financial pressure is national government. Previously, the Conservative administration, supported by all other parties, lobbied government for fair funding. I think it's fair to say with limited success, but at least everybody tried. The new Labour government is setting a direction of travel in its decisions and policies that I personally can only describe as worrying for Dorset. They are not exactly declaring war on rural councils like ours, as they appear to look to increase funding for urban councils, but we are perhaps seeing the first warning shots of this battle, urban versus rural. It's an uncomfortable place to find ourselves competing with other councils for the same pot of money. We will continue to lobby and protest, and I hope that that continued cross-party support will be forthcoming, but it doesn't look promising. We'll await our final funding settlement in the coming days with what I'm calling interest. We shall wait and see. Previously, settlements have had something of a bung to councils. There's a bit of money that comes forward to smooth the past to make something easier. I've seen little sign of that yet. I've seen no sign of that yet, but I do live in hope. Perhaps I'm being naive there. I'm happy to move, Chair, the recommendations 1 to 11.
Thank you, Councillor Clifford. I will second that. Just to point out the recommendations, there is an addendum as well to Appendix 8B, which was in the papers. So that's what is it proposed. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Councillor Clifford and also my other Cabinet colleagues for the amount of effort they've put in. It's been uncomfortable. As the new administration, we've had to make some difficult decisions, but I'd like to thank them all for the diligence they put into that and the effort. Thank you. So I'll open up to the floor. Okay, Councillor Taylor, and then Councillor O'Leary, and then Councillor Orrell.
Thank you, Chair. And Councillor David Taylor here, Chalmers St Mary. You mentioned, Councillor Clifford, the fact of the balance of sharing up the pot, shall we say, between rural and other councils. We've had an imbalance for many, many years, which we know, and we've been very aware of this. How are we going to succeed in evening it out so that actually we do get the equal share? Because the population between various councils, BCP and us as Dorset, is virtually the same. So therefore, I'm just wondering how we're going to get that balanced out completely in our favour. That's my question, please.
I think the easy answer is it's not within our gift. What we have to do is continue to fight and lobby government, in particular to get them to understand that the difference between rural and urban involves areas like rurality, the fact that transport is more difficult, the fact we have an ageing population, the fact that there are more health challenges. So it's all encompassing on a holistic view. We will look to continue to lobby. We have a Labour MP within the government. Let's try and nobble him, to coin a phrase, and try to get some action, try to get in front of ministers and get them to understand that you cannot penalise a council because it's one of either rural or urban. You have to look at the whole piece and work out what is fair funding for the services you need to provide.
Councillor O'Leary.
Yeah, thank you very much. I understand the struggles in setting this budget. You know, I've sat here for almost 6 years now and seen budget after budget, the same issues, national government. The issue I have is, and it's one of standards. The standards I have is during the previous elections which brought you to power to bring in this budget, a lot of promises were made around car parking charges. We promised that they would be reversed, the charges, and reduced. Apart from 3 car parks, all other car parks are going up, and we're now having overnight parking charges introduced. We have promised the construction of council houses. That doesn't seem to be contained within this or any other plans going forward to council. We were criticising the previous administration for cutting a cost of living fund that is now being cut itself from the looks of it. And then there's your own criticism of the previous administration continually putting up council tax that you're now doing. So what I have to ask is, when you made these promises and pledges and then go back to them in your budget, during the election, were you being naive, were you being stupid, or were you just outright lying?
So first off, before I invite some of my colleagues to answer some of those questions in their own particular area, I'll deal with the last one. If you care to read the manifesto and then reprise your statement. So we did not promise to cut car park charges in the manifesto. We didn't promise to cut council tax in the manifesto. And the way things are going, which brings me round to the national government position again, it appears the direction of travel is councils like ours will be penalised if we don't increase council tax to the maximum. There's no net benefit to come from it. But if I could encourage, I'll deal with the cost of living one. You clearly haven't read the budget. Last year's budget, set by the Conservative administration, had 0 in it for a cost of living crisis. This year's budget, set by the Lib Dem administration and coalition, has £500,000 per year for the rest of the administration, which is a £2 million commitment. If I could ask for, I think the first part was car parking. If Councillor Andrews is around to answer that one.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Clifford. Yes, Councillor O'Leary, we have to increase the parking charges because we need money for highways. That's the plain and simple truth of it. We have put them up by a very small amount on the parking charges. We've made the changes to bring in evening parking charges, and we hope it will work, including proposals for the new overnight parking permit. I don't think Councillor O'Leary wants, sorry. Yeah.
Councillor O'Leary, can we answer all the questions first, and then I'll allow you to respond once.
Okay. So the new proposed overnight parking permit is £50 per year, which amounts to 14 pence per night. And the short stay permit, which is 26 pence per day or £95 a year, it also includes the overnight parking. The flexi stay permit, £305, will be 84 pence, and that's all day and all night. So we're offering value for residents of Dorset to park in all the car parks wherever they want to during the day and night, if necessary. They'd be by the right permit. But for an off-street parking permit of 14 pence a day, I think it's very good value if you've got nowhere else to park your car. We've also extended those hours so that the people that are working that has an overnight permit and can park between the hours of 5 p.m. and 9 a.m. in the morning. That's the first bit.
Councillor Taylor, do you wish to speak?
John.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Oh, Councillor Jill Taylor, portfolio holder for Housing and Health. I noticed you commented about council houses, Councillor O'Leary. Just talking about council houses, as I've said numerous times, if somebody will give me about £100 million, I can probably build about 200 to 300 houses, which basically won't touch the edge in Dorset. We have to work differently. We cannot just build council houses. As you'll also be aware, you have an open invite to the Housing Member Working Group, where the new models of delivery are being discussed at the moment. We are looking at new ways of delivering houses in Dorset. The paper will be coming to the Overview Committee in March, and then it'll be going its way through committees, ending up at full council, I think, in about June time. We have got a really ambitious programme within this. Our first objective will be getting out of B&B and using alternative methods to provide temporary accommodation. B&B is not a good place to be putting people, and we want to do it as a last resort, not in the way we're doing it at the moment. But within this paper, there will also be some more really exciting things about how we're going to deliver, working with partnerships going forward. As I've said, you have an open invite to the Housing Member Working Group, which is still open. I've also offered to give you one-to-one briefings on housing and where we go in with that, because I know you have an interest in housing and I would welcome your attendance, sir. Thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor O'Leary, you can respond, and that's it then.
That's fine. Thank you. I'm not disagreeing with anything that Cabinet members have said, the reasons why they're doing things. What annoys me is I've got something here. If you want parking charges reduced on Weymouth, vote Lib Dem in May. I have one here. The Conservatives at Dorset Council keep increasing council tax when families are struggling. They want to do it again next year. That was in last January. There's just a litany of promises that seem to have been gone back on. Am I right in saying that the only thing we should believe then, that the leaflet that comes out is the one manifesto leaflet, and every other promise made in any other leaflet was in fact just said to get votes? And on council housing, last February at full council, I voted for a Lib Dem amendment on second homes levy where you and Councillor Hope to quote, "If the Lib Dems take control of this council in May, these will be council housing." Why are you saying things and then going back on them? I don't have any disagreements with why you're putting up council tax. It's not your fault. It wasn't our fault. It is down to central government funding from all governments. What I'm saying is, it annoys me when people say things, make promises and big commitments, and then go back on them.
I'll respond to that one. In terms of the vote you voted for, and I thank you for your support. You were one of the few Conservatives to do so. You will recall that was, we had to do that vote in February last year to give a year's notice. The money doesn't actually start coming in until April. So that money is ring-fenced for housing. It's 40% of a figure that keeps changing all the time, but we're thinking it's around about 3.5 to 4, maybe, if we're lucky. It depends on whether people keep flipping council houses and things like that. Second home, sorry. Yeah, so that's the answer. The money hasn't come in yet. And I'd just implore you to wait for Councillor Taylor's housing paper, which is coming to overview, as she said, in March, probably in Cabinet in February, the month afterwards, and then full council after that. It's ambitious. I'll just leave it there. So Councillor Orrell, I think you're next on the list.
Thank you, Chair. I'll pick up the baton on the car parking charges. It's a particularly sensitive Weymouth issue for my ward, Melcombe Regis, which is right in the centre. We've got all the hotels and the restaurants. It's great that the council's putting in development plans and you've got development land. Hopefully we'll see the cinema and the bowling alley replaced with something even better. But on that's on one hand. On the other hand, we keep getting hit with the parking. I acknowledge there has been some assistance with one car park being reduced somewhat. But this next one of putting the night charges, perhaps modest at the moment, but one can see it increasing, and it's going to hit my nighttime evening businesses, and they're already struggling enough as it is. So can I put another suggestion, cost neutral? Rather than putting up evening charges, how about giving some of the tier 1 towns the opportunity to contribute to the parking charges by raising up a levelling up agenda, one might say, for the rest of Dorset to bring it up to the levels paid by Weymouth? Thank you.
I think Councillor Andrews would like to respond to that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Orrell. I will be carrying out a parking review in the next 12 months, within the next 12 months, certainly before the next budget round. So I will take your comments on board.
I would just add, I was at Blandford Town Council last night on my tour of the town councils, and it was mentioned that Blandford residents were subsidising Weymouth residents by keeping the Swannery car park in tier 3 lower all the year round. I didn't bother answering at the time because it got a bit political. But the reality is, as you've just mentioned, Blandford is, I think, in tier 2. Blandford residents pay less than Weymouth residents for the same amount of time. People in tier 1, I think that's mostly east of the county. That's Ferndown, Verwood, Gillingham in the north. I'm trying to think. There's about 6 or 7 of them. I think they pay £1.73 hours. Blandford pay £2.20. Weymouth pay £3.30. That's on the current prices, I think, or the new prices. I can't remember which, but the new price is essentially going up 10p or 20p for 3 hours, which isn't a huge amount of money. They haven't gone up for 3 years. You know, I don't know what the compounded inflation is for the last 3 years, but it's definitely a lot more than approximately 5%, which is what it is essentially, or rounded up. I do note the previous administration 3 years ago put up them by 400%. 400% of not a lot is not a lot. Like going from £2 to £8 is, you know, in the scheme of things, not a huge amount of money, but it was 400%. It's not 5%. So I'm quite happy to leave it there. I don't think there's currently a levelling up agenda, but as Councillor Andrews has said, it's been an aspiration, certainly for the previous administration. They didn't make it happen. I can't promise we will, but there will be a parking review. But reality is then there will be the winners and losers, and a lot of the market towns and more rural places will get hit and disadvantages. So I suspect our Conservative colleagues probably won't support that. Anyway, the next person on the list is Councillor Ezard, and then we've got Councillor Weller's come in before Councillor Jesperson, so you're on the list, but Councillor Ezard first.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got two questions. One is about parking, and the other one is completely different. The parking at Purbeck Park at Norden, I noticed it's got a blanket amount of £4.20 marked on the list in the papers. And I was wondering, in the past, because that car park does get full up in the summer, and it joins up with Swanage Railway, and it's a lot cheaper than going to Swanage, because Swanage Town Council charges its own car parking charges, because all these car parks in Swanage belong to them, anything up from £8 upwards for the day. And I'm not sure what it's going to be this year, but it's a big money spinner for them. But Purbeck Park is an interim car park. It's not one of the, destination car parks, but it has got a lot of parking, but it does get filled up in the summer. And I would say you should split that so that you've got parking for 4 hours and 4 hours, so that people will change the parking spaces, because otherwise, if you don't have a turnover, you're not going to get the revenue in. So I think that needs to be a rethink, if it's possible, before full council. Can we make an amendment on that one, please? Thank you.
Are you actually proposing amendment? Because this is essentially making car parking policy on the hoof. I'll leave Councillor Andrews to respond more fully.
I mean, I haven't had a chance to talk to Councillor Andrews, but it is in the paper.
Right.
Sorry, Councillor, it's just been pointed out, you're not a member of Cabinet, so you can't actually make an amendment. So you could hold that power to dry to full council.
Right. Councillor Ezard, thank you very much for bringing that up. It's already been identified. Myself, Councillor Wilson, Mike Westwood and Giles Nicholson will be visiting Purbeck Park to have a look at that parking. And that will be part of the parking review.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Go on then.
This is totally different. It's about the funding from the DfE, which is the Department of Education, for sports centres for actual schools. And I got an email from a very unhappy head teacher from the Purbeck School saying that the withdrawal of the £350,000 that they get to use of the sports centre at Purbeck is being withdrawn. And I know Dorset Council is going to cover that for 1 year. But after that, the school has got to find that. And they said it's part of our curriculum to supply sport. And also, isn't it going to affect the sports centre for not having, and this £350,000 a year that they give, but also it's going back on to Dorset Council to pay for this. I understand from talking just before the meeting to the Finance Cabinet member that the curriculum is changing for children's sport. And so it's diminishing, and I'm really, really upset to hear that, because it means that children don't.
So, Councillor Azad, how does this directly relate to the budget paper in front of us?
They're asking the Department of Education to actually make a decision whether they are going to support this in the future or not. And it says in there a decision hadn't been made. Have we got an answer about that yet? And can we lobby the government in the future for that? And how many centres does this affect that we have directly control over the sports centres? Thank you.
Councillor Sutton.
Councillor Sutton, Cabinet Member Children's Services. I don't really think, I think 99% of this question doesn't belong in a cabinet meeting or in budget, but absolutely delighted to pick it up outside at a later point.
Thank you.
Councillor Weller, who's online.
Thanks very much, Chairman. I almost feel as though this is almost a pointless question, because it won't go anywhere. But first of all, delighted to hear that we're having yet another car park review. I can't remember how many I've read now, but they never make any difference, and they always adversely affect Weymouth. I find it quite extraordinary that the market towns across the county complain that they're subsidising Weymouth, when everybody says, well, they'll go to Dorchester or somewhere else because it's so much cheaper to park. That has a serious effect upon our economy. I'd like to refer back to Councillor Orrell, who was speaking about how badly that affects Melcombe Regis. It's not just our nighttime economy and our restaurants. An awful lot of low-income people live actually in the town centre and in the Park District, despite many of them paying for residence parking. Certainly through the summer months, it's often the case that they can't park in their streets and have to go to the car parks. An awful lot of other people simply can't afford the amount of money they have to pay up front to go into the car parks. And I don't think sufficient weight has been given to those. £90, I do take your point in it being, or Councillor Andrews, it's quite a small sum of money on a daily basis, but they're not being asked for that sum of money on a daily basis. They're being asked for £90 up front. And when an awful lot of people earn something like £40 a day or less, £90 up front is an awful lot of money. If we could only find some way of helping that, it would make an enormous difference to those low-income families. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Weller. Yeah, we will be doing a parking review, I'm afraid. We're going to go over it again and again. But we're putting the proposals forward for this budget period.
I would just like to point out, we could have removed the Swanwick car park from the exemption, essentially, like we did last year. We haven't. It's basically benefiting Weymouth residents. Yes, it is dearer than Blandford, as we've already mentioned, and that'll be subject to the parking review. And the other thing is the overnight. If you just want to park overnight, it's 50 quid, not 95 quid. So it is slightly cheaper. One of my ambitions is to try and get everything that anybody pays for through the council to be online. It's a bit like your Sky account. If you want Sky Sports, you can have it for a couple of months, you can take it off, that sort of thing. Why can't we do that for parking permits, your brown bin? And that's probably not going to happen until we introduce our new CRM system, because basically we haven't got the software to do it. But that will be hopefully soon. So I'll go on to the next person on the list, which is Councillor Jesperson, and then we've got Councillor Brown. I don't see anybody else online at the moment.
Thank you very much. Sherry Jesperson, Hillfoots and Upper Clarence Ward. And I do agree with you, Mr. Chairman, that we should be looking to having exactly that kind of payment system where people can dip in and out of services, and that's for the future. My point about the car parking is I understand the motivation to look at introducing night car parking charges, because we all know we need every penny we can get. But surely there was a better way of doing this. No business case has been made to support this proposal. We've no real idea how much revenue will be raised by these proposed overnight parking permits. We have no idea how many residents park their cars overnight in town car parks and would continue to do so if they had to pay a fee for it. We haven't asked that question. We've no idea of the impact this might have on the nighttime economy. We haven't asked that question. We haven't explored that at all. This is a rush, a frantic rush to introduce what seemed like a good idea. It would have been much better, in my view, to trial this for a period and then introduce it in a considered way. What we're doing is the worst of all possible worlds, alienating people and alienating our residents for something that might end up not being all that bad a problem for them at all, because we didn't give them chance to consider it. Now, I am indeed pleased to hear that Councillor Andrews is going to do a review. For this reason, is that I hope then that when we do that review, we will look robustly and look at the business case that we should have looked at before we introduced this parking charge scheme. See if it is in fact economically justified, what revenue we actually do earn from having overnight car parking charges. Find some metrics to measure accurately, not just by asking one cafe owner, but an accurate measure of the impact that this has on the nighttime economy, so that we can review this properly, so that we know by this time next year if this is a wise policy, wisely introduced, and that we should carry on with it. At the moment, I think this is a knee-jerk reaction. I don't think we've informed ourselves at all well about the impact this is going to have, and I think that's pity and disappointing. We could do better than this. So I'm looking to you, Councillor Andrews, to do the work that we should have done in advance, to do it in your review. Thank you.
Before Councillor Andrews answers, I think you highlighted one of the problems is you don't know how many people park in those car parks because they don't pay, and therefore we don't have statistics. You know, the machines collect the data, but if nobody's putting money in, we've no idea. But just from a guess, if you wander around Dorchester on a Friday night or Saturday night, there's one car park which just from Mark 1 eyeball is basically full to the brim, and that's Fairfield. So there's quite a lot of money to be generated just from those people who are coming in for the nighttime economy. And realistically, £2.50 to park from 6 o'clock to 10 o'clock while you go to the cinema, you go to Nando's, you go to wherever other venues. I'm sure there's lots are available. That's the reality. People will pay £2.50, and the reality is we're taking advantage of that. We need the money. So I'll leave it to Councillor Andrews to carry on.
Thank you for your suggestions, Councillor Jesperson. They will be taken on board and looked at during the parking review.
Can I also point out that the parking changes are subject to consultation as well, I believe, overnight, so that will happen, so people can have their voice. So it's Councillor Brown next.
Thank you, Chair. If you don't mind, I'm going to move us away from car parking charges. While I appreciate they're incredibly important and have a big impact on businesses and locals, the overnight charges do represent 0.1% of our annual turnover, just to put it in perspective, assuming my back of the paper maths is correct. So I just wanted to pull us towards some of the core assumptions. I just had a couple of questions for the portfolio holder and finance director. I was hoping maybe to reassure me. So staying at that high level, there seems to be a core assumption of general inflation at 2%. I appreciate we're a few months out from that, from this budget starting. RPI last month was 3.9%, CPI 2.5%, CPI with housing costs 3.5%. Bearing in mind some of the changes that central government are making in terms of above inflation pay rises to their employees and the impact that some of the national insurance changes are having on businesses, to name a few, Sainsbury's and WH Smith's making layoffs. how confident are you that inflation is going to come back to 2% by the start of this budget? And if it doesn't, 0.5% difference on, I appreciate it won't apply to the entire budget because, as you point out in the subsequent paragraph, 11.4, I think it is, that obviously some items you haven't applied a core inflation to, you've used specific line inflation. That will create a massive black hole compared to the cost of not implementing nighttime car parking charges. And then I also wanted to ask the same thing about business rates growth as well, bearing in mind we are seeing a significant number of businesses, WH Smith's for one, their announcement today, closing up shop, businesses making it very clear to their employees not to expect pay rises off the back of the national insurance changes and all those kind of things. Business is tough at the moment. That's the feedback I'm getting. I imagine that's the feedback a lot of councillors are getting from their businesses. So can you reassure me on those 2 points?
If I start off, thank you for that. Really well thought through questions. And yes, we are going to enter the dark arts. So I'll introduce our finance team to respond to some of those questions. But yeah, the people who live in the shadows. But in summary, there is risk in everything. And we have looked at risk and set aside what we think are suitable contingencies should those risks turn out to be actual hard facts that come and bite us. You're quite right. Some of these decisions, if we get them wrong, will have very significant impacts on the whole of the council and the way we run. But if I hand over to Aidan and Sean, who are the finance team, and they can go into detail on all 4 of those points.
Thank you. Good evening, Aidan Dunn, Exec Director of Corporate Development. So really, really good questions. So looking at paragraph 11.4 in the paper, there's a table there, page 78, showing some of our key assumptions. I'll draw out 2 of them. In terms of the variables, the pay award is a significant variable. We've modelled that at 2% this financial year. It's determined nationally. But in terms of what the implication is, a 1% increase in the pay award. So if we got it wrong by 1%, that equates to about £1.9 million. So it's a key variable as you identify. The other, in terms of general inflation, a 1% change in inflation, if we got inflation wrong by 1%, that equates to about 3.2 million. So we've made our best estimates based on the best information, but as Councillor Clifford has highlighted, this is where our contingency comes in. Contained within the papers is £13 million worth of contingency, which is essentially funding that hasn't been kind of specifically set aside for anything to take account of these variables. So I'd just draw out one thing in particular around inflation. So the pay award is about internal costs. Inflation is generally about our suppliers and our external costs. One of the factors we're acutely aware of is national insurance, employer pressures, particularly in the care setting. So we anticipate pressure or requests from our suppliers. So that's a potential source of pressure on the contingency fund. But also, we are in a market. It is about effective commercial strategy. It's about being good contract managers, as Councillor Parry was raised earlier. So even if our suppliers are experiencing inflation in excess of 2%, we would be looking to have those conversations with them about what is it that we can do together to help reduce that inflation pressure. So good commercial practice. So a really important point raised. I think a contingency of around 13 million is, based on the variables we've got in front of us, is my assessment is reasonable. So can I hand over to my colleague now, Sean, to comment on the business rates?
Hi everyone, so Sean Creamer, Corporate Director for Finance and Commercial. So in terms of the business rates growth, this is largely set out as part of our core settlement that we receive, which is referenced in the medium-term finance paper. A lot of this is set out at the start of the year, and therefore we're kind of always guaranteed to receive it. The risk is around our kind of in-year collection rates, which is closely monitored and reported quarterly as part of the Q3 paper, which we just saw immediately prior to this. So we do track that very closely, and we generally perform well, and we perform kind of in line with the averages and what you would expect a unitary authority to achieve. One of the risks, I suppose, and this question was kind of prefaced of what are the risks built into the budget. For 25-26, that risk is somewhat minimised, but possibly there is a risk for 26-27, as we expect there may well be a business rates reset, which looks to kind of reverse out some of the growth that we've seen. So we may see significant pressure in 26-27 as a result of where we've seen some of that growth essentially may be redistributed to other parts of the country who are assessed as needing it more than we are.
Go back.
Thank you for that comprehensive answer and the reassurances around the contingency. I guess one of the things that jumps out at me as a bit of a warning is the increase in fees and charges at 2.5%, bearing in mind that we have services for which we're not allowed to generate a profit. For example, planning, for example, we're only allowed to cover our costs. It feels to me that maybe on the income side, we're assuming inflation of around 2.5%, but on the spending side, we're assuming an inflation rate of 2%, which obviously nets out in our favour. So I just feel uneasy that maybe we're not using the same yardstick for across those two core assumptions. And as I said, trying to focus on the big numbers, but obviously that level of risk, presumably that is acceptable to the portfolio holder, and presumably, well, we'll find out if it's acceptable to the cabinet. But I would just highlight those two as not quite tying up.
Thank you. So if I make a quick comment, so our budget assumption is to increase the income from fees and charges by 2.5%. That's not necessarily putting individual prices up by 2.5%. Some of it's about generating volume, as in, and this is part of our challenge to our budget holders, and to try and think more commercially, to see what opportunities there are to generate more income. So it's not simply a price rise, it's volume as well.
Okay, thank you. I don't think we covered business rates, but business rates are payable on empty properties. I think you did. Okay, so Debate Smith aren't closing anything in our council area, I believe, yet. They're not on the list anyway. So Councillor Monks, I think.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Craig Monks, Bedminster Ward, and I'm not even sure where my question goes, whether it's Councillor Clifford, Sutton, or Councillor Hope, but maybe I would welcome comments from all three. Obviously, we're aware that, as you alluded to earlier on, that there have been reductions in the budget, things like the cost of living, and this is where I rely on Councillor Clifford to maybe assist, because I believe there's also a reduction in the general grant fund. Do we know what that looks like for individual applicants in terms of criteria, or is that a little bit too soon to ask? And my slight follow-up and plea, and this is why I mentioned Councillor Sutton, I was very grateful for the opportunity to work with you last year with the youth grant scheme that we currently hold. And obviously, as this comes out in the wash, I'd hope that we can try and secure that funding, because to me, that's an investment. I know we all have youth clubs and various different schemes within our wards. I have Prout Bridge that really need that funding. So if there's something that does get cut, hopefully it's not our youth. Bit of a vague question, so I expect a vague answer. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. If I just put you right on one thing, so there's no reduction in cost of living. It's for the first time, it's actually being scheduled through as a recurrent benefit to people who need it. If I could hand over, I think the question is individuals. It's not specifically designed for individuals. It's more like charities that are able to win grants and then carry out their work on terms of individuals. But if I hand over to Councillor Hope, who might have a little bit more insight into that area.
Yeah, thank you very much, Councillor Ryan Hope, portfolio holder for customer culture, community engagement, including leisure. Got in there before Councillor O'Leary this evening. As Councillor Clifford said, this is the first time we've seen a budget line in our budget papers for cost of living. The decision made by this cabinet previously in the year was to release money from reserves for an emergency fund to support a lot of preventative work. Our aim now with this next round of funding and over the next 4 years is to work now more in supporting the VCS sector with this cost of living line and support the work they do. We continue to do some preventative work, but what we hope to see now is the rewards of that preventative work that we've put in over the last 12 months. Of course, there'll be a full list of the projects and how that money's been spent coming to a scrutiny committee in the near future as we finish this financial year.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. Councillor Monks. The youth fund is, of course, safe and sound. That's not going anywhere. It's probably one of the most enjoyable parts of my role, and I very much hope you'll assist me with it again this year. Thanks.
If I could just be very cheeky and quickly change hats. So as Councillor Hope said, we'll be looking to support the voluntary community sector. And I mentioned earlier on my connection with some charities. One of the charities won a small grant from the cost of living crisis, and that money was used to assess whether individuals were accessing all the benefits they were entitled to. That charity interviewed and assessed 3,174 individuals and freed up, made claims for them to the tune of over £3 million, all money spent in the local economy. So it's a really important scheme, and the great work that the VCSE do sometimes gets unrecognised, but it comes back to the pressures they're also under in order to deliver that. I'll put my hat back on there.
Thank you, Councillor Clifford. Councillor Mercer.
Thank you, Chair. When I look through the budget and the transformation plans, some of the savings in some of the directorates look ambitious. Some of them look very ambitious, I have to say. That leads me on to a conversation I had with Aidan about the movement of funds round the reserves to see what funds could be made available to the general reserve. My question is there a plan B as we go through 25, 26, where if the savings are not being met and the reserves look under greater and greater pressure, is there a plan B that preserves our independence? If you can understand that point. But the one plea I would give is, given that I've been inundated like most people with problems of flooding in my ward, please give Councillor Andrews more money, particularly to spend in Blackmore Vale, because it would make my life much more easy.
It's funny how often we get a comment along the lines of, you should stop spending money, but not in my patch. I think Plan B actually is reserves, but it's a short-term plan that won't last us for very long. But if I hand over to Aidan to give you a more technical answer.
Thank you. And I think if I could just navigate us back to the previous paper, the Q3 paper, because that's got a detailed list of our reserves, paragraph on page 58. So that breaks down how the 100 million of reserves that we anticipate having at the end of this year. So 100 million of reserves does sound quite a lot, but the paper details how many of those are earmarked for specific things that can't be spent on others. But you're right, there's a little bit of wriggle room. So reserves is traditionally our fallback plan, but we can't keep doing that. We can't keep doing that. And I think we've made that very clear over the last year or two. So what's going to be crucial during the course of this year is absolute detailed monitoring of the delivery of the savings and of our future council. And making sure that we kind of strike the balance between going carefully, but actually at times we might have to go quite kind of harder to deliver some of those savings. And so we've always talked about trying to transform services first, which will free up staff and enable us to reduce the workforce. We've got to strike that balance as we go through the year. So Plan A is our transformation programme, carefully implemented, Plan B is the reserves, but we can't rely on that as a strategy for too long at all. And then, finally, as I've put in my Section 25 report, the spectre of the high needs block kind of clouds everything as well. So the assumptions in this budget are that the high needs block and the overspend related to that is addressed by government during the course of the year in terms of the statutory override. And that's a national assumption that all local authorities are making, but we do need to see the evidence from government.
If my reading of Sean's paper about reserves was right, though, reserves reduced by 59 million from the start of April 2024 to what's projected for March 2025. You know, at an erosion at that level, there isn't much wriggle room, is there? If I've read those numbers correctly.
Yeah, you have read those numbers correctly, but that's not a trajectory of the way that we're using the reserves. That a large amount of that 59 million was planned use, as opposed to just bailing out the council, as it were. So I don't foresee us using reserves to that extent next financial year, because if we were, that would be the absolute worry point, as you're describing.
I think we're done. I don't see anybody online. Any members of the Cabinet wish to speak on paper? No. Any members of the Cabinet disagree with the recommendations? There's a lot of them. No. Okay, in which case the recommendations are passed and we will resume at full council. The next paper is item 10 on the agenda, planning obligations, monitoring fees, presented by Councillor Bartlett.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Shane Bartlett, Ward Member for Wimborne Minster and Cabinet Member for Planning and Emergency Planning. So the paper you have before you enables planning authorities to charge monitoring fees through planning obligations to cover the cost of monitoring and reporting on delivery of Section 106 obligations. And the monitoring fees can be used to monitor and report on any type of planning obligation for the lifetime of that obligation. So the policy will ensure that Section 106 infrastructure is put in place by developers. This will save members of the public, the town and parish councils, ward members, officers, and planning and enforcement officers of Dorset Council investing time and energy that comes at a cost. To ensure developers are delivering on the legal agreements around infrastructure that were determined during the planning procedure. Planning legislation allows for this type of charge to be made. It fell out of favour for a while, but we are seeing an increase of its reintroduction by statutory planning authorities to cover the cost of monitoring Section 106 deliveries. So the report is in front of you. I'd like to thank Mr Gelp and his team for the excellent report that they've put in. It's a good news story. You've arrived on a happy place tonight because it's an income stream coming into the council. Hooray. So I would move the recommendation as laid out in the report, and I believe Councillor Clifford is going to second it. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Clifford, do you second anything and do you wish to say anything?
Very happy to support any scheme that brings in new income, as we've just discussed. So it's an important part of the facet, and we're looking at everything we can to develop and increase income. I'm very happy to support this.
Anybody in the chamber wish to comment, ask a question? Nope. Councillor Ezard.
Ezard Wareham Ward. Sorry, I not mentioned that before. Yes, I welcome this because there's many times when monitoring of, planning that's gone through has not been done, and we question it from our ward, and it usually means an enforcement action being taken at some point. So this monitoring will really help in that direction. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Ezard. I didn't detect a question that needs answering there. Anybody else? No. Any member of the Cabinet disagree with the recommendations as set out? No. Okay, in which case it's passed. Moving swiftly on, we have item 11, Local Authority Housing Fund, brackets LAHF, and that's presented by Councillor Jill Taylor.
Thank you. Councillor Jill Taylor, Cabinet Member for Housing and Health. This paper is an interesting one. We've been awarded about £1.75 million grant funding from the government for a scheme to provide housing for Afghan refugees and for temporary accommodation. First of all, I'd like to thank the officers who've been involved with this application. There was a lot of work required over a very short time, and they've done a really good job and are very impressive in being able to get this money in. I've just lost my notes, 2 seconds. This project will bring forward 7 properties for refugee accommodation, plus an additional 3 properties for us, Dorset Council, to be able to use for our temporary accommodation. Temporary accommodation, as you will know, is used for people who are homeless. However, we will be using this to help get us out of using a very expensive, very inappropriate bed and breakfast for those households. I'm asking for permission from the Cabinet to seek a partner to work with this. This will be a registered provider. As you're probably aware, £1.75 million will not secure 10 properties for us. It is partially, the grant funding is dependent on match funding. We are looking to go out to a registered provider or providers to look for the additional funding to make the match funding up, to make this project work. It's anticipated that the partner will provide the additional funds required and will also do the management of the properties. However, we will retain nomination rights. Additionally, there's a stipulation in the grant that tenancies should be secure, which is something that the council is unable to do, but registered providers can. So forming a partnership is the most sensible way forward on this. I'm quite happy to propose this, that we seek a registered provider to work with us on this. And as part of it, the second part of the recommendation is that we will look at a lettings plan in place so that we can fulfil the funding requirements. If I've got a seconder, please. Anybody?
So Robinson's going to second, I believe.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody wish to comment? Councillor Somper.
Thank you very much. A few questions. So I don't know if you want to do them one by one or I'll just roll in, shall I? So I've read this and well done to be able to source this and get this grant so quickly. I know they're hard getting these bids in place and always a task. Sorry for our officers. So well done on that. So it's just some questions around the technical side, really. So the recommendation is a split of 70-30 based on specific requirements and the guidelines from the LAF within the prospectus. So I'm just wondering how that's come about, because it does state in the prospectus that local authorities are ranked 2/3 on the housing pressure metrics and 1/3 on population of individuals in Afghan resettlement programs. First question. Do you want the others? Okay. Oh.
Thank you. Paul Derry, Housing Enabling and Delivery Team Leader. The allocation comes direct from government, so we were given the funding that we received according to their mechanism. There was a process to bid for more funding, particularly more funding for temporary accommodation, but we were not successful with that. So the homes for, 7 homes for Afghan refugees, 3 for TA, that fits in with the government formula.
We may have to have a further discussion on that because it does state the formula 2/3 on housing pressure and 1/3 on Afghan resettlement programs. So I don't quite understand how you've come about that, but it may be technical because I need to question that because I don't understand how you've come to that formula based on what the prospectus says. happy to be corrected on that. I also note that there's an additional 10% uplift on new properties, and I was glad to see in the report that there are going to be 5 new properties rather than acquired, and you might want to reflect that in your brief summary here. And that presumably is around £175,000 additional monies coming in. Is that part of the 1.744 million, or does that come in afterwards? Can you answer that?
Yeah.
Thank you. Can I just come in initially and just suggest, would it be worth having a more detailed briefing on this? Because at the moment, we're just asking for approval to partner with a registered provider on this. If you would like a lot more detailed information, I'd be more than happy to meet with you to discuss it and to invite officers in to help with the details.
Very happy to have that, yes. But I'm still not clear on where that uplift is going to sit. So is that sitting within that 1.744, which is clearly what will be given to the chosen housing association or partner that you go with? Or is there an additional amount of that 175 from that uplift on top of that? So that's not clear in this report.
Can I pass to Mr. Derrion to respond?
Yes, it is included in that amount.
Thank you. That was easy. Marvellous. Sorry, just losing my thread here. The one other question, and I'm sure I know what the answer is, but I just want, it doesn't state it, so I didn't want to just make an assumption. Also stated in the prospectus is that properties should be acquired in their own area unless there's a genuine need to acquire elsewhere. So I'm assuming that all the properties that are being either built or acquired are within the Dorset Council area.
Yes.
Again, brilliant. And very good to hear. Thank you. And easy to answer.
Anybody else wish to comment, ask a question? No? Nobody online? No, I can't see that. Any member of the Cabinet wish to speak? No? Okay, in which case, does anybody disagree with the recommendations? Nope. In which case, the recommendations are passed. Thank you. So the next agenda item is the Dorset Shared Prosperity Fund extension, and Councillor Richard Biggs will present it.
Thank you. This is good news. This is spending potentially 1.4 million of the UK Shared Prosperity Fund that's been allocated for 1 year, and it's only 1 year. It's probably less than we expected. So slightly disappointing, but it will be put to good use. And the purpose of this report is really just, it's more for information, because we have tweaked where we intend to spend that slightly. And obviously there's community spend, which comes into Councillor Ryan Hope's area, but the bulk of it being within the business area. And we've had some really good work that has been achieved over the years and during the time of the previous administration, although I did notice that the Conservative government wanted to scrap it completely, replace it with the National Service Scheme for youngsters. So I suppose we should be grateful we got our 1.4 million. I think the report is self-explanatory. There is a lot of detail within it. I'm happy to take questions. We've got John Bird from Economic Growth and Regeneration, who can perhaps deal with any technical ones that I can't answer, but I hope you support it. Look for a seconder, perhaps, in Councillor Hope. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. Great pleasure to support this piece of work. Sitting on the panels over the last 12 months is a real eye-opener how this small pot of funding actually transformed into larger pots of funding in our local communities. So it's a great piece of work, and I'm really happy to support this.
Thank you, Councillor Hope. Anybody wish to comment, ask a question? Nope. Anybody online? No. Any cabinet members? No. Okay, it is good news. So anybody disagree with the recommendations as set out in the paper? Nope. Okay, in which case recommendation carried. So the next two agenda items are basically for noting. The first is Kerr Dorset Holdings Limited, which is the company, arm's length company we span off of Tricura a couple of years ago, and Councillor Sompro led that on that, I believe, if I remember rightly. And so Councillor Robinson will introduce this.
Thank you, Chair. Steve Robinson, Litchfield Matravers and Upton, portfolio holder for adult social care. Back in 2021, which is before my time, Care Dorset was established with a vision and a mission. And those details are included in the report that you have in front of you. And I'm not going to go through each individual item. I'm just going to comment that looking at them, it seems that Care Dorset has not only done well, it has smashed them out of the park. And I would like to express our appreciation for the work that has gone on, not just in what I'm sure Councillor Clifford will recognise as the financial savings that have been made, but also the lives that have been touched and the people that have been helped through the operation and from the vision that was first set up in 2021. Having said that, it is also true that Care Dorset is going through a transitory phase. It is facing challenges in the current market environment in which it finds itself, but it also has challenges in its stock, in the quality of the condition of the property that we own, and we are working hard to address that, as councillors will be aware. It also, unlike many providers, has a wide variety of services. So as well as providing residential care, it also provides care within the community through day centres and through other activities. And so it has been, I would like to commend the work, and I'd like to commend this report to you as an example of real-world good practice, working with real people and touching real lives.
Thank you, Councillor Robinson. I will second that. It is, the recommendation is that it's noted. It's a technicality, I suspect. We do have the Managing Director, Chief Head Honcho of Care Dorset in the room, so if anybody wants to ask him a question as well as Councillor Robinson, feel free. I'll take the silence as a no. Sorry, Chris, but you're doing a great job. In which case, does anybody disagree with the recommendation? It is for noting, so I'm hoping there won't be anybody who doesn't want to note it. On the next item on the agenda is Dorset Centre for Excellence annual report. So this is the school the previous administration brought up in Shaftesbury, or Wiltshire, depending on your point of view. Before I go on to Councillor Claire Sutton to introduce it, I would just like to note and thank Amanda Davis, who's leaving the organisation at the end of this week, I believe. Thank you. Corporate Director for Education and Learning. You will be missed, you know that, but you've done a great job, and so thank you. And maybe we'll see you back at Dorset Council again in the future. Anyway, Eva.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, obviously, I need to reiterate that. I think Amanda's absolutely fantastic, you know, incredibly professional, diligent, always positive, and one of the warmest and kindest of hearts as well. So we will miss her, but our loss is clearly Plymouth's gain. So the paper, as it stands, you've all read it. It's very positive. It's already been considered and approved by the shareholder board. So I move the recommendation to note it. Thanks.
Can I have a seconder for the noting? Councillor Andrews. I'm not seeing any hands up anywhere. Nope. Okay, in which case, anybody disagree with noting it? No. Okay, in which case, we note. So the next agenda item, there will be a recommendation here, which is the development of the Blandford Waste Management Centre. Councillor Andrews will introduce it, and we have Gemma Clinton in the room, I believe, to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chair. This paper provides an update on the project to provide the new Blandford Waste Management Centre. The paper's laid out before you are some recommendations in front of you, which I'm going to propose. I don't think I need to go any further than that. I have the excellent Corporate Director of Waste Services here this evening. If you need to ask any questions, I'm sure they'll be professionally answered like they always are.
I believe Richard Briggs is going to second. Can I just point out there is an exempt part of this paper, and so if anybody needs to ask a question on it, we will have to stop and then move to basically adjourn it because we've got other stuff to talk about. I believe it's not the last thing on the agenda, is it? There's also an exempt item on the next one, so we'll have to move into exempt essentially. It has been before overview already, so I'll just go to a seconder first. So Councillor Biggs.
Very happy to just second it, and I'll look forward to similar schemes coming forward for Dorset and Weymouth perhaps in the future. Thank you.
Councillor Jesperson.
I will phrase this as a question. Would it be, could I ask you to accept my congratulations to urgently get on with it? We are dying to have this new facility in the Blandford area, and so very, very pleased that we've taken the next step. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to ask a question? As Councillor Biggs has said, we need more of these across the patch. There's some very good ones already. Obviously, the one out in towards Bridport is very good, but Dorchester is way beyond replacement, isn't it? So, in which case, any cabinet members want to comment? No. Anybody disagree with the recommendations? No. Okay. In which case, the recommendations passed. So the next item on the agenda is the Kerr Dorset. There's a paper. Oh no, we need to. I'm looking at. Yeah, sorry, I'm on the wrong piece of paper. I apologize. I was on my short list. Okay. So the next item is item 16, urgent items. There are no urgent items. So we need to go into exempt business. I need to read out the usual stuff and then propose and seconder. So the recommendation is that in accordance with section 100A brackets 4 of the Local Government Act 1972, to exclude the public from the meeting for the business specified in the items below, because it is likely that if members of the public were present, there would be disclosure to them of exempt information as defined in paragraphs 3 of Part 1 of Schedule 12A of the Act, and the public interest in withholding the information outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information to the public. So as in the agenda item says, it's the Kerr Dorset commercial opportunity. Can I have a proposal that we go into exempt business? Councillor Andrews, Councillor Sutton to second, in which case we'll pause for a minute while we stop the streaming and check the gallery is empty.